Once upon a time in the land of Amalu, there was a wise and compassionate ruler named King Osachi. Loved by his people, King Osachi was known for his humility and his habit of seeking advice from his council of elders on all matters, big and small. Through the wisdom of these trusted advisors, he had maintained peace and prosperity in Amalu for many years. But as the years wore on, King Osachi grew frail, his body showing the weight of his age. One quiet evening, he fell gravely ill, sending shock waves through the palace and the kingdom. The council of elders quickly summoned Prince Aduk, the king's eldest son and the heir apparent to the throne. Aduk, known for his handsome features and strength, was not known for his patience or humility, and many wondered if he had the character needed to lead Amalu. The village healer, a woman of great wisdom, approached the council with urgent news. She had seen a vision in the night. For the king's life to be spared, a ritual must be performed before the second cockcrow. But there was one condition: the ritual could only be performed by Prince Aduk himself. The elders shared the healer's vision with Aduk, urging him to prepare. "This is a moment that demands your full attention, Aduk. The life of your father, and the future of Amalu, depend on your actions tonight," said Elder Obina, his voice filled with the weight of his years and wisdom. Prince Aduk nodded solemnly, feigning understanding. But as the day wore on, his mind began to wander. His heart was drawn to his concubine, who lived in a neighboring village. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Aduk slipped out of the palace, his father's condition all but forgotten. By the time he reached the village, his thoughts of the ritual had faded completely, replaced by the laughter and allure of his lover's company. Aduk spent the night there, abandoning his duty and, with it, his father's only chance of survival.
The morning dawned, and Aduk returned to the palace with a careless air, only to be met with the sound of wailing. His father, King Osachi, had passed away in the night. The news struck Aduk with a cold jolt, but his regret was short-lived. He masked his guilt, though the weight of his actions would not be so easily hidden. The elders, disappointed and disheartened, gathered once more, and in a rare display of unity, decided to suspend Aduk's coronation. They imposed a heavy fine upon him, which he grudgingly paid before his father's burial. Though Aduk had now assumed his father's throne, he was not yet crowned. The council of elders watched him closely, hoping he would learn from his father's legacy of humility and wisdom. But Aduk was not like his father. He dismissed the elders, refusing their guidance, and choosing instead to rule with pride and stubbornness. "I am the king," he would declare, "and I know what is best for my people." Yet the people of Amalu began to sense a chill in the air, a feeling that things were not as they once were. Rumors of Aduk's arrogance spread, and a quiet unease settled over the kingdom.
Prince Aduk's ascension to the throne of Amalu marked a new era, though not one that inspired hope among his people. With his father, King Osachi, gone, the kingdom felt an unmistakable shift. Aduk, unlike his wise father, ruled with a proud heart, brushing aside the council of elders and disregarding the customs that had long sustained peace in Amalu. As days turned into weeks, Aduk's decisions grew increasingly impulsive. Elder Obina, who had served King Osachi faithfully for decades, watched with concern as Aduk dismantled the traditions that bound the kingdom together. One evening, Aduk summoned his closest advisor, a palace guard named Yagazi, to his chambers. Yagazi was not an elder, nor was he bound by the wisdom of the council. He was young and loyal, qualities Aduk admired. "Yagazi," Aduk began, his voice carrying a sharp edge. "These elders with their constant droning about tradition and advice, I will not be governed by their old-fashioned ways. I am the king, am I not?" Yagazi hesitated, knowing Aduk's temper. "Yes, Your Majesty." You are the king, and the kingdom's strength lies in your hands. Aduk leaned forward, a glint in his eye. Then let them know I shall rule as I see fit. Tell them I no longer require their counsel. If they insist on interfering, they will find themselves out of favor in this palace. Word spread quickly through the palace, and soon reached the council of elders. Shocked and dismayed, the elders gathered in a private chamber to discuss their diminishing influence. Elder Obina, with his weathered face and steady gaze, spoke first. Our new king dismisses our wisdom, yet he forgets that it was this wisdom that kept Amalu safe and prosperous. If Aduke will not listen, then we must find another way to preserve peace. Another elder, Ikenna, sighed. But how? He has made it clear he does not value our words. Obina's expression hardened. We will not give up on Amalu. We will continue to advise, and if Aduk will not listen, we shall appeal to the people themselves. Our loyalty is to the kingdom, not to one man's pride. Meanwhile, Aduk continued to assert his rule in ways that unsettled the kingdom. He raised taxes on the farming villages, ignored pleas for repairs to the crumbling town walls, and appointed friends who shared his arrogance to key positions, often pushing aside those who were qualified. The once thriving markets of Amalu began to empty, as farmers struggled under the weight of Aduk's new policies. Merchants whispered of leaving the kingdom, of seeking refuge in neighboring lands where leaders valued their people. Among the people, whispers of discontent grew louder. The Council of Elders, seeing the growing unrest, decided to take action. They arranged a secret meeting with Aduk, hoping to speak plainly and remind him of his father's legacy. But when Aduk entered the chamber, his face was set in a hard scowl. Outside the palace, the people grew increasingly restless. Murmurs turned to grumbles, and grumbles to anger. They gathered in marketplaces, in quiet homes, and along the village paths, speaking of their worries and fears. One evening, as Aduk stood alone on the palace balcony, looking out over his kingdom, he saw the glow of torches flickering in the distance. Tension filled the air in Amalu. The people, once content under King Osachi's gentle rule, now bore the weight of their new king Aduk's indifference. The young king's refusal to heed the advice of the elders had sparked unrest, and his latest decree, doubling taxes on grain and livestock, proved to be the final blow for many. The Council of Elders met in secret. Elder Obina's face was grave as he addressed the others. Aduk's rule has brought more suffering than peace. Our people are losing faith in their king. If Aduk refuses to listen, we must take matters into our own hands to protect Amalu. But what can we do, Obina? Asked Elder Ikenna, his voice trembling with both fear and anger. The guards are loyal to Aduk, and he has made it clear he will not tolerate dissent. Obina's eyes hardened. We may be unable to confront Aduk directly, but we can guide the people. They need to know they are not alone in their concerns. If Aduk will not lead wisely, then we shall lead in his place, quietly, through the strength of our community. With a heavy heart, the elders spread word among trusted villagers, encouraging them to resist the king's harsh demands in small but steady ways. The villagers were encouraged to unite, sharing their resources and supporting one another through the struggles imposed by Aduk's reign. Farmers distributed extra grain in secret, while blacksmiths offered to mend tools without charge. Quietly, resistance took root across Amalu. Meanwhile, Aduk was oblivious to the gathering storm. His palace was his fortress, shielded from the hardship his people endured. Yet, even within those walls, his arrogance began to cost him. The drumming grew louder, joined by a chorus of voices singing a song familiar to every person in Amalu. It was the song of unity, a melody sung only during times of great celebration or sorrow. Aduk frowned, signaling the guards to find the source of the disturbance. As the guards exited the palace gates, they were met with a surprising sight. Hundreds of villagers had gathered outside the palace, holding torches high, their faces set with determination. Among them stood Elder Obina, his old hands wrapped tightly around a staff as he led the crowd in song. One of the guards approached Aduk. "Your Majesty, the people are at the gates. Elder Obina is with them. They're demanding an audience with you." Aduk's eyes flashed with anger. "They demand an audience with me? How dare they?" He stormed toward the balcony, his rage barely contained. Looking down at the crowd below, Aduk sneered. "What is the meaning of this?" he shouted. Elder Obina stepped forward, his voice clear and calm. "Your Majesty, we come not out of rebellion, but out of sorrow. The people of Amalu are suffering. They only seek a king who will listen, as your father once did. We beg you to hear us, for the sake of the kingdom." But Aduk laughed, his voice dripping with scorn. "You old fools cling to the past as if it were a shield. I am not my father, and I do not need your counsel. I rule by my own hand, and none shall question my authority." The villagers stirred, anger simmering beneath the surface. Obina held up a hand to calm them, but Aduk's arrogance had already ignited a flame in their hearts. Seeing Aduk's unyielding disdain, they realized they could not rely on him for justice or peace. As Aduke turned to leave, Elder Obina spoke once more, his voice a final plea. "Your Majesty, remember this. A ruler who turns his back on his people stands alone. Without the support of Amalu, you are only a man, not a king." Aduk ignored him, returning to his feast as though nothing had happened. The crowd dispersed, but the discontent did not fade. That night, in homes across Amalu, villagers gathered to speak of their future. They were no longer willing to suffer under Aduk's rule without resistance. The peaceful land of Amalu had changed. The people, once bound together by love and respect for their ruler, now found themselves caught in a quiet but growing rebellion. Aduk's continued refusal to heed the pleas of his people had driven them to the edge. The Council of Elders, led by Elder Obina, remained hopeful that their young king might change, but the weight of his pride grew heavier each day. Within the palace, whispers traveled through the halls. The servants who had once admired Aduk's strength now spoke of his coldness, sharing stories of his indifference. Even Yagazi, the palace guard and Aduk's loyal confidant, began to see the changes in the kingdom. One evening, as Aduk sat on his throne, contemplating his next decree, Yagazi approached him. "Your Majesty," he said, hesitating as he carefully chose his words. "The people are restless. Perhaps, if you met with the elders once more, it would ease their concerns." Aduk's eyes narrowed. "Are you suggesting that I bow to the whims of the people? Do they not understand that I am their king?" Yagazi swallowed, feeling the weight of Aduk's gaze. Disheartened, Yagazi fell silent, retreating from the throne room. The people's discontent continued to grow, but Aduk's mind remained clouded by his own ego. Outside the palace, the villagers continued to meet in secret, strategizing ways to resist Aduk's oppressive rule. Elder Obina led these gatherings, encouraging the people to stand united. "Aduk may be king," he reminded them. "But he is one man. Amalu is not his to control, it belongs to all of us." The villagers nodded, their resolve strengthened by Obina's words. A few days later, news of the resistance reached Aduk's ears. Furious, he ordered Yagazi to gather the council of elders and bring them to the palace for questioning. The elders arrived, faces calm but determined, ready to face their king. When they stood before him, Aduke's expression was one of cold fury. "You," he said, his voice barely concealing his rage, "are the cause of this defiance among my people. You fill their minds with poison, turning them against me. What do you have to say for yourselves?" Igbo elder Obina stepped forward, his gaze steady. "Your Majesty, the people's loyalty cannot be demanded through fear. They yearn for the peace they knew under your father's rule. We have only reminded them that they have the right to live without oppression." Aduke scoffed, his patience wearing thin. "You speak as though you have authority over me. I am the king. It is by my hand that this kingdom thrives or perishes." Obina held his ground, unshaken. "Amalu thrives when her people are united, Your Majesty. But your actions divide us. A kingdom ruled by fear is a kingdom on the brink of ruin." A tense silence followed. Aduke's face twisted with anger, yet somewhere in his eyes, there was a flicker of uncertainty. He dismissed the elders, warning them that any further defiance would be met with harsh punishment. But as they left, Obina's words lingered in his mind, gnawing at the edges of his confidence. That night, Aduke found himself unable to sleep. He wandered the silent halls of the palace, haunted by the memories of his father's reign. He remembered how his father would walk through the village, greeting the people, listening to their worries and joys alike. Aduke had always admired his father's strength, but now he wondered if he had misunderstood what strength truly meant. In the days that followed, Aduke's anger intensified as the villagers continued to resist. The markets operated independently of the palace's control, the farmers withheld portions of their harvest, and the people united to support one another in defiance of his rule. The people of Amalu had spoken. Despite King Aduke's orders, they were determined to celebrate the memory of King Osachi, a ruler who had respected and valued them. Preparations for the festival had spread like wildfire throughout the kingdom, with villagers eager to honor the peace, compassion, and wisdom that once defined their land. On the day of the festival, the village square buzzed with activity. Vendors set up stalls, children decorated the paths with fresh flowers, and elders led songs in tribute to King Osachi. In the palace, Aduke watched with a mixture of anger and fear. How dare they defy him so openly? They had gathered in numbers, without his approval, and were even celebrating his father as if to undermine his authority. "Yagazi!" Aduke called sharply, and his trusted guard entered, his expression wary. "Your Majesty," Yagazi said, bowing. "The people have gathered against my orders," Aduke spat. "I will not let this insult go unpunished. Assemble the guards and prepare to disperse them." Yagazi hesitated, sensing the weight of Aduke's anger but also aware of the people's growing defiance. "Your Majesty," he began carefully. "Perhaps this gathering is an opportunity, a chance to show your people that you value their loyalty. Instead of force, a gesture of understanding might restore their trust." Aduke's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, he seemed to consider Yagazi's words. But pride quickly won over. "No," he said coldly. "If they insist on defying me, they will face the consequences." With a heavy heart, Yagazi left to assemble the guards, though doubt lingered in his mind. The people of Amalu were not just villagers, they were his friends, his family. As the guards gathered, Aduk donned his ceremonial robes and prepared to confront the villagers. He marched toward the village square with a determined scowl, his guards flanking him, weapons ready. The sound of drums and voices grew louder as they approached, filling Aduk with simmering rage. When they arrived, the crowd fell silent. All eyes turned to Aduk, who stood before them, radiating fury. The villagers watched in tense silence, their expressions a mix of fear and defiance. People of Amalu. Aduke's voice rang out, his tone sharp and unforgiving. How dare you gather without my permission? You claim to honor my father, yet you dishonor his legacy by defying the king who now rules in his place. The villagers held their ground, their faces resolute. Elder Obina, standing near the front of the crowd, stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. Your Majesty, we honor your father because he was a king who honored us. He listened to our concerns and ruled with kindness. Today, we gather not in defiance, but in remembrance of the peace that once graced this land. Aduke's jaw tightened. You forget yourself, Obina. I am the king. And my word is law. If you refuse to disperse, you will all be punished. But before Aduke could give the order, a young girl, no older than 12, stepped forward, her small voice carrying through the crowd. King Osachi loved us, she said, her words innocent yet piercing. He would listen to us when we were sad. He would come to the village and play with us. Why can't you be like him? The crowd murmured in agreement, their collective courage emboldened by the girl's simple question. Aduke's face reddened, caught off guard by the child's sincerity. He could feel the weight of their eyes on him, the silent judgment of his father's legacy standing in stark contrast to his own actions. For the first time, Aduke felt his power slip, not through force or rebellion, but through the undeniable truth of the people's love for his father. His anger faltered, replaced by a deep and growing discomfort that gnawed at him. Elder Obina took a step closer, his eyes compassionate yet resolute. Your Majesty, he said quietly, a king without the love of his people rules an empty throne. Power is not given by force, it is earned through respect and trust. If you wish to truly lead Amalu, it is not too late to change. Aduk looked out over the faces of his people, his pride and anger struggling against the truth of Obina's words. The villagers waited, their eyes unwavering, their spirits strong. At that moment, Aduk realized that if he pushed forward with punishment, he would only drive his people further away, leaving him isolated and despised. Slowly he turned to Yagazi and the guards. Stand down, he commanded, his voice heavy with a reluctant acceptance. The guards lowered their weapons, and the tension in the air eased. The villagers watched, a sense of relief washing over them as they saw Aduke's hand fall. Aduke faced the crowd once more, his voice subdued. I see now that I have misunderstood the strength of my people. My father may have ruled with wisdom, but I have not. The villagers stood in silent anticipation, unsure of what to expect next. Aduk took a deep breath. Today you honor my father. But tomorrow, I will find a way to honor you, my people. I will learn from his ways, and I will strive to be a ruler worthy of your respect. The people exchanged glances, some nodding, others unsure. But in Aduke's words, they sensed the beginning of something new, a glimmer of humility breaking through his pride. As Aduke turned and walked back to the palace, the villagers resumed their celebration, now carrying a cautious hope for the future. The king's journey toward understanding was far from complete, but in that moment, he had taken his first step. In the weeks that followed the festival, King Aduk kept his word. Humbled by the defiance of his people and the memories of his father's wisdom, he began to change his approach. He invited the council of elders back into the palace, meeting with them daily to discuss matters of the kingdom. Elder Obina and the other elders, though cautious, noticed the change in Aduk's demeanor and welcomed his willingness to listen. Aduk spent time traveling through the villages, seeing firsthand the struggles his rule had caused. The once prosperous farmers now struggled to feed their families, and the once bustling markets were quiet, burdened by the taxes he had imposed. One evening he approached Elder Obina. "Tell me," Aduk asked, his voice tinged with regret. "What can I do to make things right?" Obina looked at him with compassion. "Your Majesty, the people need to see your heart. They need to know that you value them as more than subjects. Restore their dignity, lessen their burdens, and they will follow you not out of fear, but out of love." With this guidance, Aduk took action. He repealed the excessive taxes and decrees that had weighed on the kingdom, and he invested in repairing the roads, the market squares, and the town walls that had fallen into disrepair. Aduk also made a point to listen to his people's grievances and ideas, just as his father had once done. The change was gradual, but over time, the people began to see the king's sincerity. Villagers who had once feared him now spoke of his transformation, and his reputation as a wise and compassionate ruler slowly took root. In a year's time, Aduk held another festival, this time to honor the people of Amalu. He personally invited the villagers to the palace, where he expressed his gratitude and humility before them. "You showed me what true strength is," he said, his voice carrying through the crowd. "A king is only as strong as the people who believe in him. I owe my journey to all of you." As the people cheered, Aduk felt the warmth of their trust. He was no longer the arrogant prince but had become a ruler in the truest sense, a leader who valued the wisdom, love and loyalty of his people above all else. True strength is not in holding power over others, but in listening, learning and leading with compassion. A ruler's greatness is measured by their willingness to serve and understand their people, not by their authority alone. Leadership is a privilege, not a right, and it's earned through respect and humility. If you enjoyed The Arrogant Prince and learned something valuable, remember to like and subscribe to our channel, Camtoon, where we bring you inspiring stories with powerful lessons every week. Share this video with friends and family, and let's spread the message of humility, kindness, and leadership. Turn on the notifications so you won't miss our next story, and tell us in the comments, what qualities do you think make a great leader?